Welcome to Part 5 of JavaFX Tables. In this screencast, we'll take a look at how we can select a single cell and read the value in that cell. Up until now, our selections have retrieved or returned the entire row. In other words, we've received the fish data record for that row regardless of the column selected. Let's get at a single cell. The first step in retrieving the contents of a single cell by clicking on it is to create a list, an observable list, of objects of type TablePosition. TablePosition is a class in JavaFX that can be used to represent a column, a row, or a single cell. We're going to be using it for a single cell. Here we are in the Initialize method. We are changing the selection model for a fish data table. By default, the selection model returns rows. We wish to indicate our desire to select individual cells. The original listener, which returned the row, remains in effect. We are still going to see our dialog pop up and tell us all the values in a given row. The observable list of table positions has to be initialized. Here we're doing this by getting all the selected cells. It's kind of misleading because it's returning all the cells, not specific cells at this point. And then finally, we are adding a listener to this observable list, so that we know when a cell is selected and we can carry out the necessary action, in our case, to examine the contents. The final step is this method, show single cell details. It receives as a parameter the necessary information to be able to recognize a change in the selection of a cell. The first step in this method is first of all to see, were there any cells in the observable list? We know there were. With that information, we can now proceed to extract the table position by first dealing with get zero, in other words, what our table position is, what our column is. From this we can get our row index. We can retrieve the value from this particular column at this particular row. It's returned as an object of type object because we don't know in advance what we may have placed in that cell. And finally, just for this presentation, I'm simply going to print out in the log the value found at that particular position. Let's see how all this works together. Our table should be up in a moment. And here we go. Now, as soon as I click on a cell, you'll notice one significant change, and that is only a single cell lights up. I've said single cell selection. Let's move my dialog box to the side. So here's the information for this entire row. We left this particular listener in place, though in your calendar, in your agenda program, there wouldn't be much value in this. At the bottom, though, in the log, we can recognize that it's showing that the value is 5-19-DH, the value we see in here. I'm going to say OK, and I'm going to pick my rosy barb over here. When I select the rosy barb, I see the contents and I see rosy barb. Now notice that the cell rendering is overriding the standard coloring when something's selected. Let's look at that again. If I click there, I say OK, and that's selected, 680. If I select the cell that's been rendered, its coloring does not change. This will require an enhancement to the cell renderer, which I'll leave for you to discover, and let's see how it goes. So that's it for presentations for this first week. There will be another set of screencasts for next week, that unusual week where we have no classes, but for which you must still be working on this to have everything ready for Phase 3. Happy programming!